Hey y'all, patriotism or insurrection? Today, into the fray.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Hey y'all, Patrick James, John Double Tap Britton, into the fray. Today, what are we talking about?
I don't know. How about... Well, there was a little blurb at the beginning of this video, something about patriotism and insurrection.
Patriotism and insurrection.
Are you a patriot or an insurrectionist while
Are
he
you
checks
both?
his phone?
Are you both?
Well, can you be both?
That's a good question, John. That is a very good question.
Yep.
Our founders, were they insurrectionists?
Well, if you listen to people talk today, you hear phrases like, the founders be stacking bodies by now.
They would be stacking bodies, they'd be chopping heads, they would be refreshing
The tree of liberty.
with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Maybe they would.
Except usually when they say that, they have a tendency to leave out the patriots part, and it's just the blood of tyrants, as if that's going to work that way.
Yeah, we know, anybody with common sense knows that it takes two to tango, and it will take two to tango, and dozens and dozens and hundreds of dozens and a lot more tangling there.
So let's get into this.
But the reality is, were our founders insurrectionists?
Well, they called themselves patriots.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
I don't know. I know patriotism would be loyal to a specific cause.
I think probably the best way to sum it up would be, say, like a football team.
Live free.
When you take the field, you got one side on offense, one side on defense.
Are you a Patriots fan?
Not particularly. Born and bred Texan, but I don't watch the NFL. No fans left.
Unfortunately. Go ahead.
But that pretty well sums it up. Patriots are defenders.
Yep.
Insurrectionists are offenders. And
so when does the time come for us to be offenders, or excuse my ignorance, but I don't understand. My government is being tyrannical. They're not upholding my natural liberties. When is it time for me to say something, do something about it?
Well, that depends on what kind of do something you're talking about. Now, are you talking about do something as in hold them accountable?
Well,
Or are you talking about do something as in tar and feather them and run them out on a rail?
I like the latter.
Yeah,
I think we never should have gotten rid of it. I think it's a great deterrent for abuse of power.
But when you
Civility.
look back at the founders as an example, they spent 10, 15 years, from the end of the French Indian War. The Crown started trying to recoup their monetary losses by taxing the colonies and things of that nature. Taxation without representation, we all know that one.
Mm-hmm.
But they still spent 10, 15 years petitioning the Crown, petitioning Parliament, trying to get a redress of their grievances. All of the tools that we have in our Constitution are there because they didn't have them. But yet they still tried to work within the system until the point that the redcoats showed up on their doorsteps.
Well, but
started
how
quartering
long-
troops in their houses.
How long do we have to suffer at the hands of what appears to be a tyrannical government?
All experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. That's from the Declaration of Independence.
Well, I mean, they created an amendment to tax our labor.
Which was passed through the amendment process by the people and by the states.
So the people agreed.
Yes.
The people agreed to having their labors taxed.
That's sure how it looks. It's how it looks on paper.
It's not exactly how it looks. It's exactly how it is. We, the people, have failed our government.
And they've taken advantage of our failures.
Absolutely. Like man will always do.
You know, one of the things that comes up, and we've been called, since we started Cold Dead Hands almost 10 years ago,
You ain't nothing.
we've been called insurrectionists, anti-government.
We've been called insurrectionists by those who don't really understand what the term insurrection is.
But we have never advocated for the overthrow of our government.
Nope.
That's an insurrectionist.
That is.
We have always advocated for the engagement of the people. Because just like the founders themselves said, the Constitution is but a
Parchment barrier.
paper tiger.
That's it.
It's
old, just words.
It's words on a very old piece of paper, unless the people, remember the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Unless the people actually uphold it, it's just a piece of paper.
Yep.
And that's where you get into defender versus insurrectionist.
Yep.
I think it was Benjamin Franklin said it's a common observation here that our cause is the cause of all mankind.
All.
And that we're fighting for their liberty in defending our own.
Defending. Which means lovers of liberty are not aggressors.
They're defenders.
Because we defend for all of mankind. If we're defending for all of mankind, then who are we aggressing against?
Right. But the fight is not necessarily one of blood and bullets. The fight is one of hearts and minds.
And it always has been. Thus, without the pen of pain, the sword of Washington would have been wielded in vain. Listen, guys, they didn't just say these words, they meant them.
Yep.
We're talking about a huge federalist, a huge proponent of organized religion, who actually didn't view the wall of separation the same as other founders like Jefferson viewed it.
Or Paine.
John Adams acknowledged the fact that without people like Paine to rally the hearts and the minds of the people themselves, the sword would have been useless.
Because, and I've told people this so many times I couldn't even begin to count. Everybody's like, well, the politicians are so corrupt, we need to just get rid of them all.
We do?
You could literally get rid of every one of them, but without the people on your side, the people will elect more of the same the next election cycle. So you've just made yourself an insurrectionist. You've overthrown the government and given it back to the people who put in the exact damn same government.
Yep.
I wrote an article, it's been a little over a year ago, talking about the phases of revolution. And one of the points that I made in that article was just that. Without the people, you've got to win the hearts and minds of the people for a revolution to even get off the ground. And if you don't, when it does get to the shooting phase, you have the majority of the people siding with the government that you're trying to overthrow, and you're the crackpot that's getting strung up.
And it doesn't matter if you are a real crackpot or if you're just a real believer in liberty and freedom as they were described and bestowed upon us.
Right.
Those unalienable rights. That's not being a crackpot. Those are really true, honest feelings, and we have to hold tight to them. We have to protect them like a jewel from everyone, because that's what they are.
But you don't necessarily protect them with a gun.
But you don't go out bombing federal buildings. That's no bueno. You don't go out shooting federal agents. You don't go out and do these things and think that that's propping up the natural rights of other men.
You know, just like the Franklin quote, you know, the cause is for all mankind. You know, you're not fighting for your liberty, you're fighting for liberty. And you have to guard the persons who you disagree with the most. You have to guard their liberty just as diligently as you do your own.
Yep.
You know, the founders didn't go out and cull the herd. You know, they didn't say that, oh, you know, those loyalists, they'll never come around. We just have to exterminate all of them and then we'll be good.
Yep. It's like saying all government officials are bad. They're not.
No.
There are some out there who are good statesmen. They are good people. They do want to uphold the natural rights of we the people. So we can't say all politicians are bad. They're all politicians, and they definitely have a propensity to do bad, and they can become corrupted very easily. So they must be watched over with eternal vigilance. Thus, why Jefferson said it takes eternal vigilance.
Yep. So on the subject of patriots and insurrectionists, it pretty much boils down to, if you're not defending liberty, and I don't mean defending it with a gun, but defending it ideologically, morally, you know, defending it by engaging with those who disagree with your position, but you protect their liberty as much as your own, so that you have the support of the people.
Gosh,
what was it? You know, the 3% movement. You know, as the story goes, only 3% of the American colonists actively participated in the American Revolution, but they were also supported by about a third of the population, as the story goes. So it's not a matter of having to win everybody, but you do have to win enough support that when they do come knocking at your door, they're just not dragging you off because you got somebody watching your six.
Yeah, they're dragging off your neighbors and your neighbors' neighbors. And you know what? That makes a huge impact and difference. You know, I was trying to find this quote because I couldn't think of the name of the colonel. Colonel Parker. His quote: "Stand your ground, but don't fire unless fired upon. But if thee mean to have war, let it begin here." That was exactly what defenders of liberty are to do. We defend. I know for some of you, well, that's a bad tactic. It is what it is, man. Being a defender has always been the harder, because you can't plan it out. You can only plan to defend.
Yep.
The aggressors have a whole lot more in their bailiwick of tactical tricks that you've got to defend against, but that is just where we are at.
Yep.
We're defenders. And until everybody understands that, and we can win the hearts and minds of our fellow countrymen, I know some have been lost. I know that because we've been here in the social media trenches, mud, muck, blood, guts, puke, you name it, of everybody who comes along. I know that there are some people out there lost.
But there are also people out there who are salvageable.
Or misguided.
I mean, we've just in comments on social media or private messages with people who have reached out to the page. We have actually had converts who were stone cold liberals, socialists, bring on the Marxist revolution. Now, they haven't embraced our ideology totally.
No.
But they've at least come to a point where they can engage in a conversation without just dismissing the other side out of hand as a Nazi.
Well, I mean, let's face it. We posted a Declaration of Independence for the world to see, and specifically King George. And we declared ourselves a sovereign, independent nation and people. We didn't start a war. We didn't start a war with King George. They didn't want to start a war with King George.
No, they worked for 10 or 12 years trying to avoid that.
They didn't want to start a war. And the Declaration wasn't a declaration of war. It was a Declaration of Independence. War started when King George enforced unconstitutional laws upon the sovereign nation of the United States. It was already declared. It'd be like Texas saying to the United States government, which, if they keep going down the path of tyranny, I would hope a bunch of states would declare their independence from the federal government.
Now, there's people who say, well, you don't have the right to secede. But this wouldn't be a secession.
It wouldn't be secession.
This would be a Declaration of Independence.
Declaration, just like the United States did to England in declaring their independence. We didn't declare war. If England hadn't come over and enforced King George's rule...
Oh, tried to enforce.
Tried to. We shot that one down. But... Literally. Had he not come over here and he just said, screw it, let them have their little piece of country over there.
They're halfway around the world. Do I really want to spend the blood and treasure to fight this?
Out of sight, out of mind, who cares? No, he didn't do that, but had he done that, there would have been no war. Independence would have been gained without war. This is what we're talking about. Insurrection against this government, that's not what our founders intended. Defending liberty, declaring independence, those are things that they talked about. It's not an instigation. It's not an act of war. It is a declaration of independence. Is that where we're headed? I don't know.
I mean, there is talk along those lines. Now, is that the answer? I mean, it may come down to be the final straw, but just like I said, the founders worked for years trying to work within the Crown's quote unquote system.
Yeah.
And in so doing, instilled tools for us to use so we don't have to resort to the sword.
Yeah.
Question is, do we have patriots still willing to use them? Are they so frustrated by the system that they're not engaged? Are they so apathetic and complacent that, as long as I get to and from work and my kids get into a good school, that's all I need? Eternal vigilance is just that, eternal vigilance. It takes work.
And before you go around calling a bunch of people pussies or afraid to stand up or to fight back or to do whatever, understand that in defending liberty and freedom, if you come after my liberty and freedom directly, you'll find out that it's quite different than what you might have anticipated. Because I am a shepherd who will defend my immediate flock. I won't act out of aggression, but I will not tolerate aggression against me or my loved ones. And John's the same way, and most of the men, the people, the women that we know are exactly the same way. So this isn't about who's a wimp and who's not a wimp. This isn't about who's right and who's wrong, because the federal government has become too restrictive We understand that. They are becoming very tyrannical in a lot of the laws they have passed. The stimulus bill is just another one of those omnibus bills that need to be stopped. Enlighten us.
You know, like I said earlier before we started this video, the imposition of one's will over another is at the heart of tyranny, whether it's a government imposing its will on the individual or quote-unquote patriots who call themselves that but are actually insurrectionists out there stacking bodies of people who disagree with them.
Or keyboard commandos that are running around all social media just calling everybody a
Nazi,
bootlicker
or a bootlicker,
or a fascist or a socialist, or y'all don't have a clue of what you're talking about, but you've got a very loud voice, so you just continue to run your mouths on social media, beating people up and dividing those that actually believe in the natural rights as defined in the Declaration of Independence by Jefferson, that were creator bestowed, unalienable rights. We believe and will defend those rights with everything we have until you come along and say stupid shit like, you're a bootlicker. Sorry, bro. I don't buy into your anarcho-capitalist way of thinking, because guess what? John enlightened me a little bit more today about what the philosophy behind it is that you have this silent agreement.
The non-aggression principle.
The non-aggression principle that goes behind the scenes of anarcho-capitalism that allows it to be fruitful and work. Y'all are so stupid if you believe that's how that will work. We already discussed how that's not even remotely possible.
I mean, just think about it. You have laws backed up by law enforcement that people don't obey.
Right.
But some general non-aggression principle everybody's just going to adhere to because because we're going to barter and trade, right? That's your philosophy. Barter and trade for everything. Let me enlighten you. Their answer to the because is because if you don't F around, you're going to find out.
Going to find out.
So it is very Darwinian in its application.
Absolutely.
Survival of the fittest. Only the strong survive.
Whoa, that's tribalism.
Oh, yeah.
That's got nothing to do with anarcho-capitalism, and it's all about tribalism, feudalism, which all rolls itself down to slavery, bondage.
I feel like we've gotten into a whole nother video here.
We've gone down the rabbit hole, so we're going to pop back up and we're going to talk about insurrection and patriotism.
Although it is those anarchist types who want to burn down the government, who want to throw them all out, run them all out on a rail, and just live in peace and harmony in total freedom.
Tap on the comments, man. I know y'all have seen them. I know I have, my share of them. And the reality is their way of thinking doesn't work. The Marxist way of thinking doesn't work. The corrupt governmental federalism that they've taken the ball and run with and decided to take all our money and spend it wherever they want.
That's more like a
themselves.
Statist oligarchy.
Exactly. Statist oligarchy. That doesn't work. But you know what does work?
A federalist constitutional republic?
Bingo. As it was intended.
Limited government.
Limited federal government with greater state and sovereign rights. That's what does work. But that is the jewel that must be guarded with eternal vigilance.
And that is the idea that needs to be repropagated into society.
Revisited, repropagated, reprogrammed into all men and all women and all people, that we all have creator bestowed rights that are unalienable.
So, are you a patriot willing to defend those rights, both verbally, socially, financially?
For all?
Even physically, if necessary. Or are you an insurrectionist who wants to impose your view on others and cull the herd of those who can't be saved, kind of like the Nazis did the Jews?
Yeah, yeah. We have to think about what it is you want, and then you got to stand upon your wants. But you got to make sure your wants can align with other people's rights.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, then you have to tailor your wants. So we'll leave you with this. It's a little long.
Little Sam Adams, not the beer.
Though the beer is good.
Yeah.
The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending at all hazards. And it is our duty to defend them against all attacks. We have received them as a fair inheritance from our worthy ancestors. They purchased them for us with toil and danger, and expense of treasure and blood, and transmitted them to us with care and diligence. It will bring an everlasting mark of infamy on the present generation, enlightened as it is, if we should suffer them to be wrested from us by violence without a struggle, or be cheated out of them by the artifices of false and designing men. That's an article, October 14th, 1771.
Boston Gazette.
This is what we're talking about. That is what we have to work within.
That is a patriot.
That's patriotism.
That's the defender defending a cause for all mankind, not just themselves, and defending even the liberties of those who they most vehemently disagree with.
It's standing upon the KISS principles of natural rights and what that means. As Jefferson said, how did he define natural rights?
As in, like, rightful liberty?
There you go.
And rightful liberty is basically the liberty to do as you please within a circle drawn around you by the equal rights of others.
Exactly. We all have differing opinions, and we all have differing desires. Some may desire to shoot whatever gun it is they want to shoot. Some may have a desire to have no guns. The desires have to be defined within these rights. We all have to come to the understanding of rights and what they are, and our differences can fall to the side because we stand upon the unity of what natural rights are.
And the best definition of a right that I have found, a right applies to everyone universally.
Equally.
Free speech. Everybody has the right to free speech.
Yep.
Freedom of religion. Everybody, men, women, children, have the right to worship as they choose.
As long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others. You can't sacrifice somebody for your rituals.
And that's where the circle around you comes into play.
Yeah.
You know, even free speech has its limits. You can't slander people and defame people.
You can't pen them up in a daggum room and force them to watch a video.
And that's the point.
You got free will.
A right has inherent responsibility because of that circle around you of the equal rights of others. So if you're abusing that right, that's rightly punishable.
Yep.
But if you're not abusing that right, whether people like what you have to say or like the religion you practice or whatever, like the gun you shoot or not, as long as they're within that circle, more power to you, baby.
Don't like a 1911? Cool. Don't like a Glock? Cool. Prefer an AK over an AR? Cool. Doesn't matter. As long as you stay in your wheelhouse and I stay in my wheelhouse, we're cool. Don't come into my wheelhouse and say I can't carry a 1911. We may have problems. So, that is what we need to figure out. And, you know, it's not the laws of man. It's the laws of a creator. It's the rights that were bestowed upon us unalienable and equally across the board. when we can define those the way the Creator bestowed them and the way our founders defined them for us, instead of trying to intrinsically go in and determine what they mean, we know what they mean. Common sense dictates what they mean.
Even though at the time they penned some of those words, they weren't universally applied. You know, slaves didn't have rights, women didn't have many rights. But the words themselves, the ideas of the natural rights, is what got us to where we are today, minus the things we've let get out of control.
Well, and it's what lives in the hearts of man.
Right.
So if we can get back to what should live in our hearts, then everybody has equal rights, natural rights. And it's not based upon a race, a religion, a creed, sexual orientation, sex. It's not based upon those things. All people have an equal right at birth to those things. Doesn't mean our outcomes are going to be equal. It just means that we start at an equal point. So I know there's more convolutions to that, and there's plenty of more rabbit holes that can be chased in talking about that. But that is what we, as the people of the United States, need to find our equilibrium and stand upon those rights.
And like the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists that created it, we need to distill it down to the things we agree on, rather than try to get one side to compromise its principles or the other side to compromise on this. Break it down. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yep.
Where do we agree? Boom. That's where we start.
Maybe we'll never find that unity. I don't know. But maybe we will see the declarations of independent states. I don't know. I hope that if that day comes, I am living and breathing in a state that stands up for my natural rights and declares their independence based upon those. Otherwise, I'll be moving quick.
Amen. That's all I can say. God bless Texas.
Until then, just remember, if you want peace,
prepare for war, baby.
Thanks for watching.